Imagine a fearless teacher standing her ground against a ruthless gang, their cruel laughter echoing as they mock her. What they didn't know? The students they underestimated were national karate champions, trained, disciplined, and ready to defend the woman who believed in them. This is the story of an epic showdown that will leave you speechless and inspired. You won't believe what happens next. Watch till the end, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear your thoughts. The morning light struggled to pierce through the thick haze of smog that hung over the neighborhood, casting a muted glow on the cracked pavement and graffiti-streaked walls. The quiet hum of a city waking up was broken by the sound of spray paint cans hissing and raucous laughter echoing down the street. A group of young men, their faces marked by arrogance and bravado, loitered outside the school gates. They moved with the confidence of predators in their territory, their voices loud as they defaced the school's brick facade with slurs and mocking caricatures. Ms. Amara Thompson stood at the corner of the block, her hands tightening on the strap of her worn leather bag. She had seen this before. Too many times, in fact. The same kind of scene played out when she was a child in a place not unlike this one, where gangs claimed everything, from the streets to the futures of the kids who walked them. Her sharp brown eyes swept over the group, lingering on the leader, a wiry young man with a silver chain glinting against his dark hoodie. He was leaning back, spray can poised, as if daring anyone to challenge him. Amara exhaled, her breath visible in the chill of the morning air. She adjusted her glasses and strode forward, each step measured and deliberate. The sound of her heels clicking against the pavement caught the attention of the group. Their laughter died down, replaced by a curious, mocking silence. "Well, well," the leader drawled, his lips curling into a smirk as he turned to face her. "If it isn't Ms. Thompson. Come to give us a lecture on respect, teach." The others snickered, emboldened by his tone. Amara didn't falter. Her gaze was steady, her posture unyielding. She stopped a few feet away from them, close enough to show she wasn't intimidated but far enough to keep herself safe. Her voice, calm but sharp, cut through the tension like a blade. "You've made your point, Dre," she said, her tone carrying both authority and weariness. "The school doesn't belong to you, no matter how many walls you claim." Dre chuckled, shaking his head. He tossed the spray can into the air, caught it, and gave it a flourish like a performer taking a bow. "Belong? Ms. Thompson, this whole block belongs to us. You just live here on borrowed time." The others howled with laughter, their voices loud and grating. Amara let the noise wash over her, unmoved. "Borrowed time or not," she said firmly, "I'll be here every day. And so will the students who still believe their futures are worth something. You can't take that away with a can of paint." Dre's smirk wavered, just slightly, but he quickly recovered. He stepped closer, invading her space. The others watched intently, expecting her to shrink back. She didn't move. Instead, she met his gaze head-on, unflinching. His confidence faltered further, but he masked it with bravado. "Careful, teach," he said, his voice low. "Talking like that might get you in trouble." Amara didn't blink. "Talking like this is the only way trouble ever goes away," she replied. Her tone was even, but the challenge in her words was unmistakable. Dre narrowed his eyes at her, weighing his next move. "Come on, Dre," one of the others called, breaking the tension. "We've got places to be." Dre lingered for a moment longer, his jaw tightening. Finally, he scoffed and stepped back, spinning the spray can in his hand before tossing it into his backpack. "You're lucky I'm in a good mood," he muttered, waving the others to follow. "Let's go." As the gang retreated, their laughter fading into the distance, Amara allowed herself a small sigh of relief. She turned to survey the graffiti they had left behind. A crude drawing and a few words meant to humiliate. It would take hours to clean, but that wasn't what weighed on her most heavily. The real damage wasn't on the walls. It was in the hearts and minds of the kids who had to walk past it every day, the ones who were told over and over again that they didn't matter. She pulled a small notebook from her bag, jotting a reminder to organize a cleanup crew. Her mind was already moving to the students waiting for her in the classroom. They were why she kept showing up, why she stood her ground. even when it felt like the world was crumbling around her. She slipped the notebook back into her bag and walked toward the school, her steps as steady as her resolve. As she pushed open the doors, the chaos of the morning shifted into a quieter hum of activity. Students milled about, some chattering in clusters, others keeping their heads down as they hurried to class. A few of them glanced at her with uncertain smiles, a mix of admiration and concern etched on their faces. Amara nodded to them, offering reassurance in the form of a small, warm smile. They needed to know that no matter what happened outside those walls, they had a sanctuary here, her sanctuary. Inside the classroom, the air buzzed with muted energy. Ms. Thompson's students were settling into their desks, their voices a low hum as they exchanged quick conversations before the bell rang. The walls of the room were a stark contrast to the graffiti-smeared exterior. Bright posters displaying motivational quotes and charts of academic progress adorned the space, alongside a hand-drawn calendar featuring the students' upcoming karate tournament. Amara walked in, her steps deliberate, her face calm. The chatter died down as the students noticed her presence. She set her bag on the desk, her eyes scanning the room, her expression one of quiet authority. A moment passed before she spoke, her voice measured and deliberate. "Good morning, everyone. I trust you all had a peaceful night." The question hung in the air for a beat longer than necessary. Malik, seated in the front row, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Layla, beside him, looked down at her notebook, pretending to jot something down. Rico leaned back in his seat, his face set in a practiced nonchalance. None of them met her gaze. Amara sighed softly, her hands clasping the edges of her desk. "I saw the front of the school this morning," she continued. "I imagine most of you did too. What happened out there isn't just paint on a wall. It's a challenge to every single one of us who believes this place, this community, can be something better." Her words hung heavy in the room. A few students fidgeted, their faces conflicted. Malik raised his hand, hesitating slightly before speaking. "Ms. Thompson, it's not like we don't care. But what can we do? Those guys, they're not just playing around." Amara nodded, her gaze steady. "You're right, Malik. They aren't. But the question isn't what they're doing. It's what you're going to do in response." Rico scoffed, leaning forward on his desk. "What are we supposed to do, Ms. T? Paint over their tags? They'll just come back with something worse." Amara turned her attention to him, her eyes soft but unwavering. "I'm not asking you to fight their battle, Rico. I'm asking you to rise above it." Rico opened his mouth to retort, but Malik spoke first, his tone thoughtful. "You mean like at the dojo? Focus, discipline, all that?" A small smile tugged at the corners of Amara's lips. "Exactly like at the dojo. The principles you've been learning in karate aren't just for the mat. They're for life. For moments like these when you're being tested." Layla finally raised her head, her voice quiet but firm. "But they don't play by the same rules we do. Doesn't that mean we're at a disadvantage?" Amara stepped out from behind her desk, moving to the center of the room. "It might feel that way, Layla. But remember, strength isn't just about who can throw the hardest punch. It's about control, strategy, and understanding your own power. You've all worked hard to develop those skills. Now it's time to use them not to fight, but to protect and build." The room fell silent as her words sank in. Some of the students looked skeptical, others thoughtful. Malik sat straighter, his brows furrowed in concentration. Rico stared at the floor, a muscle twitching in his jaw. Amara let the silence stretch for a moment before clapping her hands lightly. "Now, let's get to work. Today's lesson isn't just about history. It's about making it. Let's talk about leaders who stood their ground in the face of challenges, who refused to let their circumstances define them. Open your books to page 50. As the students flipped through their textbooks, Amara moved back to her desk, her mind still turning over the events of the morning. She caught a glimpse of Rico, his hand paused on the edge of his book. His eyes were distant, his expression troubled. She made a mental note to speak with him after class. The lesson began, the students slowly engaging as Amara wove stories of resilience and courage into the day's curriculum. But even as she taught, her thoughts remained on the growing tension outside the school walls. She knew the battle ahead wouldn't just be fought with fists or words. It would require every ounce of strength, wisdom, and unity they could muster, and she was determined to lead the way. The bell rang, and the students began to pack their bags, the weight of the morning's discussion still lingering in the air. Most moved with quiet purpose, while a few whispered among themselves, their eyes darting toward the door, as if wary of what awaited them outside. Amara noticed Rico lingering at his desk, his movements slow and deliberate. She took the opportunity to approach him, her voice low enough to avoid drawing attention. "Rico," she said softly, pulling up a chair to sit across from him. "Something's on your mind. Want to talk about it?" Rico avoided her gaze, his fingers fidgeting with the strap of his backpack. "It's nothing, Ms. T, just stuff, you know?" "Stuff," she repeated gently, leaning forward. "The kind of stuff that makes you zone out in the middle of class and clench your jaw so tight I can see the tension from here." He hesitated, his shoulders tightening. "It's those guys," he admitted after a moment. "Dre and his crew. They've been messing with people, messing with me. They trashed my uncle's car last week. He didn't even do anything to them." Amara's expression softened, a mixture of concern and understanding. "I'm sorry that happened, Rico. But you know this isn't about your uncle. It's about control. They want to scare you into thinking they own you." Rico's fists tightened on the table. "Well, it's working. What am I supposed to do? I can't fight them. You've seen Dre. He's got no rules. He doesn't care about fair." Amara reached out, placing a hand gently on his. "Rico, you're stronger than you think. And I don't just mean physically. You've learned to fight, but more importantly, you've learned when not to. That control is what they don't have, and it's what makes you powerful." He looked at her, his eyes conflicted. "It doesn't feel like enough." "Sometimes it won't," she admitted. "But strength isn't about feeling invincible. It's about doing what's right, even when it's hard. And you're not alone in this. You have your teammates, your dojo, and me. We'll figure it out together." Rico nodded reluctantly, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. "Thanks, Ms. T," he muttered, slinging his bag over his shoulder and heading out the door. As he left, Malik and Layla lingered by the door, watching their friend with a mix of concern and curiosity. Malik turned to Amara, his voice low. "Is Rico okay?" "He will be," she replied, her tone reassuring. "But I need both of you to keep an eye on him. He's carrying more than he should, and I don't want him trying to handle it alone." Layla nodded, her sharp eyes narrowing. "Dre's been pushing harder lately. Rico's not the only one he's targeting. I heard some of the younger kids talking about him hanging around their block too." Amara's jaw tightened at the news, her mind racing. Dre was escalating, testing boundaries. She needed to act before things spiraled further. "Thank you for letting me know," she said. "Both of you stay close to your team and remember what you've learned. Discipline, focus, and unity. That's how we'll get through this." Malik nodded solemnly. "We've got your back, Ms. T. She gave them a grateful smile as they headed out, their presence a small comfort in the growing storm. Amara stayed in the empty classroom for a moment longer, her thoughts heavy. She wasn't naive. She knew the kind of danger Dre and his crew posed. But she also knew her students. They had heart, discipline, and something Dre didn't understand: purpose. As she gathered her things and locked up the classroom, she resolved to speak to Sensei Nakamura at the dojo that evening. It was time to prepare the students not just for their tournament, but for the challenges that would test them far beyond the mat. Outside, the sun had begun its slow descent, casting long shadows over the school grounds. Amara walked toward the dojo, her pace quickening with determination. She could feel the weight of what was coming, but she didn't flinch. This fight wasn't just hers. It was theirs. Together, they would rise. The dojo was a sanctuary of quiet discipline, its polished wooden floors reflecting the soft glow of the evening lights. The faint smell of sandalwood incense lingered in the air, mingling with the rhythmic sound of padded fists meeting heavy bags. Students of all ages moved through their drills with precision, their focus unwavering under the watchful eye of Sensei Nakamura. The older man, with his silver-streaked hair tied back neatly, stood at the center of the room, his posture as upright as his principles. Amara entered quietly, pausing at the threshold to take in the sight. This was where her students transformed. Here they weren't just teenagers trying to survive a harsh world. They were disciplined fighters, honing their bodies and minds to rise above their circumstances. She spotted Malik and Layla sparring in one corner, their movements fluid and practiced, while Rico stood by the punching bag, his strikes hard and deliberate. Sensei Nakamura turned as she approached, offering a respectful bow. "Amara," he greeted, his voice calm but warm. "You look troubled." Amara returned the bow before speaking, her voice low to avoid distracting the students. "It's Dre and his crew. They're escalating, and it's starting to affect the kids, Rico especially." Nakamura's expression darkened slightly, his hands folding behind his back. "I've heard whispers about this Dre. He preys on fear, thrives on chaos. A dangerous combination." Amara nodded. "Rico told me they've already targeted his family. He's holding it together for now, but I'm worried about what will happen if they push him further. The others are watching him too. They're all feeling the pressure." The sensei's gaze drifted to the students, his sharp eyes assessing their movements. "The dojo teaches more than physical strength," he said after a moment. "But in times like these, the lessons must extend beyond these walls. They need to understand not just how to fight, but why they fight." Amara's lips pressed into a thin line. "They know Nakamura. They've learned discipline, control, and purpose. But Dre doesn't follow the same rules. They're going to face challenges that can't be solved with drills." Nakamura placed a hand on her shoulder, his grip firm but reassuring. "Then it's our job to prepare them for those challenges, not just as fighters, but as people who lead by example. Fear may be Dre's weapon, but unity is theirs." She nodded, the weight of his words grounding her. "Thank you, Nakamura. I don't know what I'd do without this place." "You would do exactly what you always do," he said with a small smile. "Lead with strength and integrity." Amara turned her attention back to the students. "I'll speak with them after practice. They need to know what's at stake." Nakamura nodded, stepping aside as she approached the group. She clapped her hands once, the sharp sound cutting through the room and drawing the students' attention. They gathered around her, their faces flushed from exertion but alert. "Good work tonight," she began, her tone encouraging but firm. "Your focus and discipline are exactly what I expected to see, but now we need to talk about something more important." The students exchanged uncertain glances, the shift in her tone sharpening their attention. "Dre and his crew are testing us," she continued. "They think they can intimidate us into silence, into giving up. But I know each of you, and I know what you're capable of. You've trained for years to develop not just your skills, but your character. This is the moment where that training matters most." Malik stepped forward, his brow furrowed. "So what do we do, Ms. T? We can't just let them keep pushing us around." "No, we can't," she agreed. "But we're not going to stoop to their level. You've been taught that karate isn't about violence. It's about control, about defending what matters without giving in to anger or fear." Layla nodded, her voice steady. "But what if they come for us? For our families?" Amara's gaze softened as she looked at her. "That's why we stand together. None of you are alone in this. You have each other, and you have this community. Fear only works when we believe we're isolated, but together we're stronger than any threat they can throw at us." The students straightened, their expressions shifting from doubt to determination. Rico, standing at the back of the group, spoke up, his voice quiet but firm. "I'm in." "Me too," Malik added without hesitation, followed by nods and murmurs of agreement from the others. Amara smiled, pride swelling in her chest. "Good. Now let's get back to work. We're not just preparing for the tournament anymore. We're preparing for something much bigger." The students dispersed, returning to their drills with renewed purpose. Amara watched them, her heart heavy but resolute. The fight ahead wouldn't be easy, but she knew they were ready. Together, they would face whatever came next. The dojo emptied slowly that evening, the students leaving in pairs or small groups, their laughter and chatter a comforting contrast to the tension of the day. Amara stayed behind, helping Sensei Nakamura tidy the space and preparing her thoughts for the days ahead. The rhythmic sound of cleaning cloths against wood echoed softly in the quiet dojo. As she finished stacking mats in the corner, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She hesitated for a moment before pulling it out, expecting another message from the school about the ongoing vandalism. Instead, the screen displayed an unfamiliar number. She frowned but answered, her tone cautious. "Hello?" A familiar voice crackled on the other end, sharp with mockery. "Ms. Thompson, I hope I'm not disturbing your evening." Her grip tightened on the phone. It was Dre. "What do you want, Dre?" she asked, keeping her voice steady despite the chill creeping up her spine. "I just wanted to check in," he said, his tone dripping with faux politeness. "You know, make sure you and your kids are doing all right. It'd be a shame if things got complicated." Amara's jaw tightened. "If this is your idea of a threat, it's not working. We're not afraid of you." Dre laughed, the sound cold and menacing. "Oh, Ms. Thompson, you really are something, but here's the thing. You should be. Because if you keep playing the hero, you're gonna find out just how complicated I can make things. For you, for your students, for anyone who gets in my way." Amara's heart pounded, but she refused to let it show. "You underestimate us, Dre. That's your mistake." "Underestimate?" he replied, his tone sharp. "We'll see about that. Keep watching your back, Teach. It's not just you I've got my eye on." The line went dead before she could respond. She stood frozen for a moment, the weight of his words settling over her. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about everyone who depended on her, everyone Dre saw as a threat to his control. Sensei Nakamura approached quietly, his perceptive eyes narrowing at her expression. "Amara, what is it?" She lowered the phone, exhaling a slow, steady breath. "Dre," he called. "He's trying to rattle me, but it's more than that. He's targeting the kids now. He knows how much they mean to me." Nakamura's jaw tightened, his usually calm demeanor shadowed by concern. This man is playing a dangerous game. Fear is his weapon, but it can also be his undoing. "What do you plan to do?" Amara squared her shoulders, determination hardening her features. "We stand firm, we keep the kids safe, keep teaching them the strength they already have. And we don't let him win." Nakamura nodded. "Good, but you're not facing this alone. Whatever support you need, you have it here." "Thank you," she said, her voice soft but resolute. "I'll need all the help I can get." The weight of Dre's threat stayed with her as she left the dojo that evening, the cool night air wrapping around her like a shroud. She walked briskly, her mind racing with plans. She needed to alert the parents, the school staff, and the dojo community. They couldn't afford to be caught off guard. As she turned a corner, she noticed Malik and Rico standing under a streetlight deep in conversation. She paused, observing the way Malik leaned in, his expression serious, while Rico seemed agitated, gesturing animatedly. They hadn't seen her yet, so she waited, listening. "I'm telling you, Malik," Rico said, his voice taut with frustration. "We can't just sit around and wait for him to come to us. That's not how this works." "And what's your plan, Rico?" Malik replied, his tone firm but calm. "Go after Dre? Start a fight you know he's waiting for? That's exactly what he wants." "I can't just do nothing," Rico shot back. "What if he comes after my family again? What if he—" "He won't," Amara interjected, stepping into the light. Both boys turned to her, startled. "Because we're not going to give him the chance." Rico opened his mouth to protest, but she held up a hand to stop him. "I know you're scared, Rico, and I know you're angry. But fighting Dre on his terms won't solve anything. It'll just give him what he wants, control over you." Malik nodded, his shoulders relaxing slightly. "She's right, man. We stick together, we stay strong. That's how we beat him." Rico looked between them, his jaw tight. After a long moment he exhaled, nodding reluctantly. "All right, but if he comes at us—" "He won't," Amara said firmly, "because we're going to make sure he doesn't get the chance." She placed a reassuring hand on Rico's shoulder before walking them both home, her presence a steady anchor against the rising tide of fear. As the night deepened, she knew the real battle was just beginning, and it would test them all in ways they couldn't yet imagine. But one thing was certain: she wouldn't let Dre win. Not now, not ever. The following morning dawned with a bitter chill that seemed to seep into every corner of the neighborhood. As Amara arrived at the school, she noticed an unusual stillness in the air, an almost palpable tension. A small crowd of students gathered near the entrance, their faces a mix of worry and anger. Among them, Malik and Layla stood at the front, whispering urgently. Amara quickened her pace, her breath visible in the frosty air. As she approached, the crowd parted slightly, revealing the source of their unease. The wall beside the entrance was covered in fresh graffiti, a bold, garish mural that depicted a mocking caricature of her and several of her students. Above it, in dripping red letters, were the words, "You can't win. Stay down." Layla turned to her, her fists clenched, her expression a mix of fury and frustration. "Ms. T, they crossed the line. They're not just coming after the school anymore. They're coming after us." Amara's stomach churned, but she refused to let her composure slip. She stepped closer to inspect the graffiti, her face calm but her mind racing. The students watched her, waiting for her reaction, their own emotions simmering just beneath the surface. "Let's not give them what they want," she said after a moment, her voice steady. "They're trying to intimidate us, to make us lose focus. But we're not going to let that happen." Malik stepped forward, his voice firm but laced with anger. "We can't just let this slide, Ms. T. They're getting bolder. If we don't do something, they'll think they can get away with anything." Amara turned to him, her gaze steady. "We will do something, Malik, but it won't be out of anger. It'll be out of strength and discipline, the same values you've been learning for years. That's how we fight this." Her words hung in the air, calming some of the tension in the group. Rico, standing at the edge of the crowd, looked unconvinced. His jaw tightened as he muttered, "Words aren't going to stop Dre." Amara heard him but chose not to respond directly. Instead, she addressed the group as a whole. "Everyone inside. We'll talk about this after classes today. For now, focus on your studies. Show them they can't distract you from what really matters." The students hesitated, but eventually began to file inside, their murmurs fading as they disappeared into the building. Amara stayed behind, her eyes lingering on the graffiti. She felt a presence beside her and turned to see Principal Monroe, his face drawn with concern. "This is getting out of hand," he said quietly. "We've reported the incidents to the authorities, but so far there's not much they can do without witnesses or evidence." Amara nodded, her frustration bubbling beneath her calm exterior. "Then we'll keep doing what we can here. The students need to know they're not alone in this." Monroe sighed, his gaze shifting to the defaced wall. "I just hope it's enough." "It will be," Amara said, her tone resolute. "Because failure isn't an option." That afternoon, the dojo was unusually quiet, the usual energy replaced by a tense determination. The students moved through their drills with focus, their movements sharp and deliberate. Amara observed them from the sidelines, her arms crossed as she mentally prepared for the conversation she needed to have. When practice ended, she gathered the group in a tight circle. Sensei Nakamura stood nearby, his presence a silent reassurance. Amara took a deep breath before speaking, her voice steady. "You've all seen what happened this morning," she began. "Dre and his crew are pushing harder because they're starting to see us as a threat. That means we're doing something right, but it also means we need to be smarter, stronger, and more united than ever." Layla raised her hand, her voice steady but questioning. "What's the plan, Ms. T? We can't just wait for them to come to us." Amara nodded, her gaze sweeping over the group. The plan is to stay focused on your training, on your studies, on supporting each other. We're not going to play their game, but we are going to be ready for anything. Malik spoke up next, his tone thoughtful. What about the community? Dre's got a lot of people scared. If we don't do something to show them they can stand up too, nothing's going to change. Amara smiled, pride flickering in her chest. You're absolutely right, Malik. Change starts with us, but it doesn't end here. That's why we're going to organize a community event, a cleanup day for the school, followed by a karate demonstration. We'll show everyone what discipline, unity, and resilience look like. The students exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from doubt to determination. Rico crossed his arms, a skeptical look on his face. And what if Dre shows up? What if he tries to ruin it? Amara's smile didn't falter. Then we show him exactly what we're made of. Her words landed like a spark, igniting a flame of resolve in the group. They nodded in agreement, their confidence growing. Amara looked at each of them, feeling the weight of their trust and the strength of their spirit. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The days leading up to the community event were a blur of preparation and anticipation. The students worked tirelessly after school, spreading the word, designing flyers, and planning the demonstration with meticulous care. The dojo became their headquarters, a place where ideas flowed as freely as their punches and kicks. Amara moved among them, offering guidance, encouragement, and the occasional reminder to stay focused. Despite their progress, the shadow of Dre and his crew loomed large. Each time the students left the dojo or the school grounds, they glanced over their shoulders, wary of what might be waiting for them. Amara noticed the tension and addressed it during one of their late evening sessions. Fear is natural, she said, standing before the group as they sat cross-legged on the dojo floor. But it's also a tool. If you let it control you, it will hold you back. But if you face it, it can push you to become stronger. You've already taken the first step by refusing to back down. Now we focus on the next step, action. Malik raised his hand, his voice steady but laced with curiosity. What kind of action, Ms. T? I mean, the event's a great idea, but Dre's not just going to let us have it without trying something. Amara nodded, her gaze sweeping over the group. That's why we prepare. You've all learned how to defend yourselves, not to seek out conflict, but to protect what matters. The event isn't just about cleaning up the school or showing off your skills. It's about showing the community what we stand for and reminding them that they can stand too. Layla chimed in, her voice thoughtful. And if Dre tries to stop us? Then we respond with the same discipline and control you've been practicing for years, Amara said firmly. We don't stoop to his level, we rise above it. The students nodded, their determination growing. Sensei Nakamura, who had been listening quietly from the edge of the room, stepped forward, his presence commanding attention. You are warriors, he said, his voice calm but powerful. Not because of your strength, but because of your spirit. Remember that as you face whatever challenges come your way, you fight not for revenge, but for peace. His words settled over the group, a quiet reassurance that bolstered their confidence. Amara exchanged a grateful glance with Nakamura before clapping her hands. All right, she said, a small smile breaking through her serious expression. Let's run through the demonstration one more time. Show me what you've got. The day of the event arrived, bringing with it a rare sense of hope. The sun shone brightly, melting away the lingering frost and illuminating the school grounds, now cleared of graffiti and debris. Parents, teachers, and community members gathered, their conversations a mixture of curiosity and cautious optimism. The students stood near the dojo's makeshift stage, their white uniforms crisp and their faces determined. Amara moved through the crowd, greeting attendees and keeping an eye out for any signs of trouble. Malik and Layla stood beside her, their eyes scanning the area. Rico lingered near the stage, his posture tense as he adjusted his belt. The event began with a cleanup effort, volunteers spreading out across the school grounds to plant flowers, repaint walls, and sweep away trash. It was a small act, but it carried a powerful message. This was their space, and they weren't giving it up. As the afternoon wore on, the crowd grew, and anticipation built for the karate demonstration. Amara stepped onto the stage to address the audience, her voice carrying a mix of warmth and resolve. "Thank you all for being here today," she began, her words met with scattered applause. "This event isn't just about cleaning up our school. It's about reclaiming our community. It's about showing that we won't be defined by fear or intimidation. And it's about celebrating the strength and resilience that lies in each of us." She stepped aside, motioning for the students to take their places. The crowd hushed as the demonstration began, the students moving in perfect synchronization. Their kicks, punches, and stances were sharp and precise, a testament to their years of training. As they performed, murmurs of admiration rippled through the audience. But as the demonstration reached its peak, a commotion stirred at the edge of the crowd. Amara's heart sank as she saw Dre and his crew sauntering toward the stage, their faces twisted in smirks. They stopped a few feet from the audience, their presence a dark stain on the otherwise hopeful atmosphere. The students faltered for a moment, their movements losing rhythm as they noticed the gang's arrival. Amara stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "Stay focused," she called to them. "You've got this." The students regrouped, their movements resuming with renewed precision. Dre crossed his arms, his smirk widening as he turned to one of his crew. "Cute little show they've got going on," he said loudly, his words dripping with mockery. The crowd began to stir, unease rippling through the attendees. Amara stepped off the stage, her eyes locking on Dre. She moved toward him with steady, deliberate steps, her presence commanding attention. "Dre," she said evenly, stopping just a few feet from him. "You're welcome to stay and watch, but if you're here to cause trouble, you're wasting your time." His smirk faltered for a fraction of a second before returning. "Trouble? Nah, we're just here to enjoy the show." Amara didn't blink. "Then enjoy it from there. If you make one move to disrupt this event, you'll regret it." Her words were quiet, but the conviction behind them was unshakable. Dre's smirk twisted into a sneer, but he didn't respond. Instead, he leaned back, his posture casual, but his eyes sharp. The demonstration continued, the students finishing with a final, powerful kata that earned thunderous applause from the audience. The community had stood together, and for the first time in a long while, hope felt tangible. But as Amara returned to the stage to close the event, she knew this wasn't the end. Dre had made his presence known, and she had no doubt he was already planning his next move. The warmth of the community's applause still echoed in Amara's ears as she stood by the stage, watching the crowd begin to disperse. Volunteers carried cleaning supplies back to their cars, parents congratulated the students, and a few younger children practiced clumsy karate moves in imitation of the demonstration. For a moment, everything felt lighter, a small victory in an uphill battle, but Amara's instincts told her the peace wouldn't last. Dre and his crew had lingered at the event's edge, their presence a dark cloud over the day's success. As the crowd thinned, she noticed Rico standing near the refreshments table, his eyes darting toward Dre, who was still lounging nearby. Tension radiated off him like heat. Amara made her way over, intercepting Rico before his frustration could boil over. She touched his shoulder gently, her voice low. "Rico, stay with the group. Don't let them get to you." He turned to her, his jaw tight. "They're laughing at us, Miss T. Standing there like nothing we do matters. It's—" "I know," she interrupted softly, her gaze steady. "And that's exactly what they want. Don't give them the reaction they're looking for. Remember what you've learned." Rico hesitated, the anger in his eyes battling with the discipline instilled in him through years of training. Finally, he exhaled sharply and nodded. "Okay, but I don't trust them." "You don't have to," Amara said. "You just have to trust yourself." She stayed with him for a few moments longer before returning to help dismantle the stage. The students were busy folding mats and packing gear into storage bins, their chatter a welcome distraction from the tension lingering in the air. Layla approached her, holding a stack of flyers. "Ms. T, do you think they'll try something tonight?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Amara glanced toward the street where Dre's crew still loitered. "I don't know." she admitted, "but we'll be ready if they do." As evening fell, the school grounds were quiet again. The success of the day marked only by freshly planted flowers and cleaned walls. Amara locked up the dojo, her movements deliberate as she ensured every window and door was secure. The students had gone home in groups, escorted by parents or older siblings, a precaution she insisted on. She stepped into the cool night air, her senses heightened as she began the walk home. The neighborhood seemed unnaturally still, the usual hum of distant traffic and muffled conversations replaced by an unsettling silence. Her thoughts drifted to Dre's sneer, the veiled threat in his eyes. The sound of footsteps behind her broke her reverie. She turned sharply, her pulse quickening, only to see Malik jogging to catch up. He stopped a few feet away, slightly out of breath. "Ms. T, I didn't want you walking home alone," he said, his tone matter-of-fact. Amara's initial instinct to refuse softened as she saw the determination in his expression. "Thank you, Malik," she said, a small smile breaking through her tension. "But you didn't have to." "I know," he replied, falling into step beside her. "But I wanted to." They walked in companionable silence for a few blocks, the familiar streets casting long shadows under the dim streetlights. Amara was about to thank him again when a loud crash shattered the quiet. She froze, her heart racing as the sound of shouts echoed from a nearby alley. Malik stiffened beside her, his fists clenching instinctively. "That's them," he whispered, his voice laced with anger. Amara turned, her eyes scanning the darkness for movement. In the faint light she could make out Dre and two of his crew members, their figures silhouetted against the broken glass of a nearby shop window. One of them was spray painting a crude symbol on the wall, while the others laughed and jeered. "Stay here," Amara said firmly, her voice low. She moved cautiously toward the commotion, her steps deliberate but silent. "Ms. T," Malik started, but she silenced him with a quick glance. She approached the group, her posture calm but commanding. "What do you think you're doing?" she called out, her voice cutting through their laughter. Dre turned slowly, his smirk widening as he recognized her. "Well, if it isn't the fearless Ms. Thompson," he said, spreading his arms theatrically. "Out for an evening stroll?" "Vandalism and theft," Amara said, her tone cold. "Is this how you prove your strength, Dre? By destroying what others build?" Dre's smirk faltered for a split second before he stepped closer, his face inches from hers. "You don't scare me," he said, his voice low and venomous. "And you sure as hell don't tell me what to do." Amara didn't flinch, her eyes locked on his. "I'm not here to scare you, Dre. I'm here to stop you. And I will." His crew shifted uneasily behind him, glancing between their leader and Amara. The tension crackled like electricity in the air, but before Dre could respond, the sound of approaching sirens broke through the standoff. One of his crew muttered a curse and they bolted into the shadows, leaving the broken window and graffiti behind. Dre lingered for a moment longer, his eyes narrowing. "This isn't over," he hissed, before disappearing into the alley. Amara stood still, her breath steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Malik approached cautiously, his face pale but resolute. "You okay, Ms. T?" he asked, his voice tight. She nodded, her gaze still fixed on the empty alley. "I'm fine. Let's get you home." As they continued their walk, the sirens faded into the distance, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than before. Amara knew this confrontation wouldn't be the last, but she also knew she couldn't let fear dictate their actions. They had won a small victory today, but the battle was far from over. The next morning, the school was abuzz with murmurs about the previous night's incident. News of Dre's vandalism and his narrow escape from the police spread quickly, with students swapping exaggerated stories in hushed tones. Amara walked through the halls, her head held high despite the weariness tugging at her. Her encounter with Dre had left her unsettled, but she knew she couldn't show it. The students needed to see strength, not fear. Inside her classroom, the atmosphere was tense. Malik and Layla sat in their usual seats, their heads bent close as they whispered. Rico leaned back in his chair, His arms crossed, his face clouded with frustration. The other students, sensing the undercurrent of unease, were quieter than usual. Amara placed her bag on the desk, her movements deliberate as she surveyed the room. When the bell rang, she stepped to the front, letting the silence settle before she spoke. "I know many of you have heard what happened last night," she began, her voice calm but firm. "Yes, Dre and his crew caused some trouble, and yes, they got away, for now. But what matters is how we respond." Rico scoffed loudly, drawing a few glances. "What are we supposed to do, Ms. T? Sit back and let them keep pushing us around?" Amara turned to him, her expression steady. "We're supposed to stay focused, to use what we've learned, not just from karate, but from everything we've been working toward, as our foundation." "They don't care about our foundation," Rico shot back, his frustration spilling over. "They don't care about anything except proving they're stronger." Amara stepped closer, her gaze softening as she addressed him directly. "You're right, Rico. Dre and his crew don't care about rules, discipline, or growth. But that's their weakness, not ours. Strength isn't about how loud you are or how much damage you can do. It's about resilience, about standing firm in what you believe, no matter what." The room was silent, the weight of her words pressing down on the students. Malik raised his hand tentatively. "But what if they come after us again? Or after our families?" Amara's expression softened further. "Then we protect each other, not with violence but with unity. Dre thrives on division and fear. If we show him that we're stronger together, that we won't break, he loses his power." Layla spoke up, her voice quiet but determined. "So, what do we do now?" Amara glanced around the room, meeting each student's gaze. "We keep moving forward. We don't let him dictate our actions or our goals. The community event was a success because of you. People saw your strength, your discipline, your potential. That's what we build on. We keep training, keep supporting each other, and we show Dre that no matter what he does, he can't shake us." Later that evening, the dojo was alive with energy. The students threw themselves into their training with renewed determination, their movements sharper and more deliberate than ever. Amara and Sensei Nakamura observed from the edge of the room, their expressions a mix of pride and resolve. "They're rising to the challenge," Nakamura said quietly, his arms crossed as he watched Malik lead a kata practice. "But the tension is wearing on them." Amara nodded. "It's wearing on all of us. But they're stronger than they realize. This is their test, not just of skill but of character." Nakamura turned to her, his gaze thoughtful. "And what about you, Amara? How are you holding up?" She hesitated, the weight of the question settling heavily on her. "I'm doing what I have to. For them." He nodded, his expression unreadable. "Remember, even the strongest warriors need support. Don't try to carry this alone." Amara managed a small smile. "I won't. But right now, they need to see strength, not doubt." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of raised voices. Amara turned quickly, her eyes narrowing as she saw Rico and another student, Jay, facing off near the punching bags. Rico's fists were clenched, his posture aggressive, while Jay gestured angrily. "You think this is a joke?" Rico snapped, his voice sharp. "Dre's out there waiting for us to screw up, and you're not even taking this seriously." "I'm not the one with an attitude," Jay shot back. "Maybe if you stopped acting like you're the only one who cares, we'd actually get somewhere." "Enough," Amara said firmly, stepping between them. Her voice carried an authority that silenced the room. "This is exactly what Dre wants, to see us divided. Are you going to let him win?" Rico looked away, his jaw tight, while Jay crossed his arms, his expression sullen. Amara's gaze softened as she addressed them both. "We're a team. We face this together, or we fall apart. What's it going to be?" After a long pause, Rico muttered, "Together." Jay nodded reluctantly, and the tension in the room eased. "Good," Amara said. "Now, back to training. We've got work to do." As the students returned to their drills, Amara exchanged a glance with Nakamura. The challenges were mounting, but so was their determination. Together, they would weather the storm. The dojo remained a hive of focused activity in the following days, but the air was charged with a mix of anticipation and unease. Every punch, every block, every kata carried the weight of what was at stake. The students trained with renewed purpose, their movements sharper, their determination unwavering. Amara kept a close eye on them, pushing them just enough to strengthen their resolve without breaking their spirits. One evening, as the session wound down, Amara gathered the students in a circle. Sensei Nakamura stood nearby, his quiet presence a steady anchor. The students sat cross-legged on the polished floor, their faces serious as they waited for her to speak. "You've all made incredible progress," Amara began, her voice steady. "Not just in your training, but in how you've come together as a team. That's what's going to carry us through this, our unity. No matter what Dre and his crew throw at us, we stand together. Understood?" "Yes, Ms. T," they responded in unison, their voices firm. Rico, sitting near the edge of the circle, raised his hand. "What if Dre doesn't back down? What if he tries to come after us like he did at the event?" Amara nodded, her expression thoughtful. "That's a possibility, but if he does, we'll be ready. Remember what we've been practicing: control, focus, discipline. These aren't just words, they're tools. Tools to keep us strong even in the face of fear." Layla spoke up, her voice quieter but no less determined. "But what if it's not just us? What if he goes after our families again?" Amara's jaw tightened at the thought, but she kept her voice calm. "That's why we're doing this together. If we show Dre and the community that we're united, that we won't be intimidated, we'll send a message he can't ignore. And we won't just defend ourselves, we'll inspire others to stand with us." The students nodded, their resolve clear in their expressions. Amara felt a swell of pride as she looked at them, each one stronger and more confident than they'd been when this all started. That night, as the students filed out of the dojo in small groups, Amara stayed behind to speak with Sensei Nakamura. The two of them stood in the center of the now quiet space, the air still humming with the energy of the training session. "They're ready," Nakamura said, his voice calm but resolute. "But are you?" Amara hesitated, her gaze drifting to the darkened window. "I have to be. They're counting on me." He stepped closer, his expression thoughtful. "Being strong doesn't mean you have to carry this alone, Amara. Remember, you're part of this team too. Let us support you as you've supported them." She nodded slowly, the weight of his words settling over her. "Thank you. I'll keep that in mind." The next day brought an ominous quiet to the neighborhood. The usual background noise of children playing and neighbors chatting seemed muted, as if the air itself held its breath. Amara felt the tension as she walked to the school, her senses heightened, her thoughts racing. Something was coming. She could feel it. When she arrived, Malik and Layla were waiting for her outside the building, their faces tense. "Ms. T, we heard something," Malik said quickly, glancing around to make sure no one else was listening. "Dre's planning something big. Some of his crew were talking at the corner store last night. They said they're ending this soon." Amara's stomach clenched, but she kept her expression steady. "Did they say when or where?" Layla shook her head. "No, but it sounded like they meant it. They're getting desperate." Amara nodded, her mind already working. "Thank you for telling me. Stay alert and stick together. We'll be ready." That evening, Amara called an emergency meeting at the dojo. The students gathered quickly, their faces a mix of curiosity and concern. Sensei Nakamura stood beside her as she addressed the group. "Dre and his crew are planning something," she began, her tone firm but calm. "We don't know when or where, but we can't afford to be caught off guard. From this moment on, we prepare for anything." Rico leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "So, what's the plan, Ms. T? Are we finally going to take the fight to them?" Amara shook her head. "No, Rico. That's exactly what they want. An excuse to drag us into their chaos. We won't give them that, but we will protect ourselves and our community. That means staying disciplined, staying alert, and staying united. Malik nodded. We've got each other's backs, no matter what. Amara smiled, pride swelling in her chest. That's exactly right. Together, we can face anything. As the students nodded in agreement, Amara felt a renewed sense of purpose. The fight ahead wouldn't be easy, but she knew they were ready. Whatever Dre had planned, they would stand their ground, and they would not fall. The night air was heavy with tension, the kind that prickled the skin and refused to dissipate. The streets, normally bustling with life even after sundown, were eerily quiet. Amara sat in her small apartment, her phone clutched in her hand, her thoughts restless. The students had been texting her updates all evening, each message a small thread in the web of unease that was tightening around her. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Malik. Malik. Ms. T, Dre's crew is moving. Rico saw them near the old factory. Looks like they're up to something big. Amara's heart quickened, but she forced herself to stay calm. The old factory had been abandoned for years, a shadowy labyrinth of rusted machinery and broken windows. It was the perfect place for Dre to make a statement, or set a trap. Amara, stay where you are. Do not engage. I'm on my way. She grabbed her jacket and headed out the door, her mind racing. As she stepped onto the street, she dialed Sensei Nakamura, who answered after the first ring. They're gathering at the old factory, she said quickly. I'm going there now. I'll meet you there, Nakamura replied without hesitation. Be careful. When Amara arrived at the factory, she spotted Malik, Layla, and Rico waiting near the edge of the lot. They had ignored her instructions, but she didn't have time to scold them. Their faces were tense, their postures rigid with anticipation. What are you doing here? She hissed, her voice low. I told you to stay away. We couldn't just sit around, Malik said, his voice equally hushed. We're a team, remember? Amara sighed, glancing around to ensure they weren't being watched. All right, but stay behind me, and if anything happens, you run. Understood? The three nodded, their expressions resolute. Together, they moved closer to the factory, staying in the shadows. Inside, the flickering glow of flashlights and the low murmur of voices confirmed Dre's presence. Amara's sharp eyes scanned the scene, taking in the scattered figures of Dre's crew, who seemed to be positioning themselves as if preparing for something. What are they doing? Layla whispered. Amara squinted, her gaze narrowing on Dre, who stood in the center of the group, gesturing animatedly. They're planning to make a statement, something loud enough to scare the community into silence. A sudden crash echoed through the factory, followed by Dre's voice, loud and mocking. This is just the beginning. We own this neighborhood, and it's time everyone learns to stay in line. Rico clenched his fists, his breathing quickening. We can't let them get away with this. Amara placed a firm hand on his shoulder. And we won't. But we do this smart, not rash, trust me. Before she could decide their next move, Dre's voice rang out again. Bring it in. Let's show them what happens when they don't listen. Two of his crew members rolled in a large barrel, its contents sloshing ominously. Amara's stomach sank. Whatever was in that barrel wasn't meant to help. It was meant to destroy. We have to stop them, Malik whispered urgently. They're going to burn something down, aren't they? Amara nodded, her mind racing. She turned to the students. Stay here. I mean it this time. Sensei Nakamura is on his way. If anything goes wrong, you call for help. Rico looked like he wanted to argue, but Malik placed a hand on his arm, silencing him. Amara gave them a firm nod before slipping into the shadows, moving closer to the group inside. Her heart pounded in her chest, but her training kept her movements quiet and deliberate. Who's there? One of Dre's crew shouted suddenly, spinning toward the darkness. Amara froze, her pulse quickening as Dre stepped forward, his flashlight sweeping the area. You'd better come out, he called, his voice edged with menace, or we'll come find you. The moment stretched taut, every sound amplified. Then from the shadows, Sensei Nakamura stepped forward, his posture calm but commanding. Looking for me, Nakamura said, his voice steady. Dre's smirk twisted into a sneer. Who the hell are you? Someone who's tired of watching you bully this community, Nakamura replied, and someone who knows exactly how to deal with cowards like you. Dre's crew tensed, but Nakamura didn't flinch. Amara took advantage of their distraction to move closer, her eyes locked on the barrel. If she could reach it, she could stop whatever they were planning. Dre laughed, a cold, humorless sound. You've got guts, old man, too bad you're outnumbered. That's the thing about numbers, Nakamura said, a hint of a smile on his lips. They don't mean much against skill. At that moment, Amara emerged from the shadows, her voice ringing out with authority. And you're not as in control as you think, Dre. The students, unable to stay back any longer, followed suit, stepping into the light with steely determination. The sight of them, unified and unyielding, drew murmurs of uncertainty from Dre's crew. Dre's sneer faltered for a moment before he barked, "What do you think you're gonna do? You're just kids." "We're more than that," Amara said firmly, "and we're not afraid of you." The tension crackled like a live wire, the confrontation poised to explode. Amara and Nakamura stood tall, the students flanking them, their eyes blazing with resolve. Whatever came next, they were ready. Together they would face it head-on. The factory air was thick with anticipation, the dim light casting long shadows across the dusty floor. Dre's crew shifted uneasily, their confidence wavering as they faced Amara, Nakamura, and the students. Dre, however, held his ground, his sneer deepening as he stepped closer to Amara. "You think you can stop us with a couple of fancy kicks and big words?" he mocked, his voice dripping with disdain. "You're way out of your league, Teach." Amara met his gaze, her voice calm but resolute. "This isn't about me, Dre. It's about the community you've been terrorizing, and we're not backing down." Dre's sneer twisted into a glare. He motioned to his crew. "Get them out of here. Make them regret ever showing up." His crew hesitated, glancing nervously at Nakamura and the students, whose calm confidence seemed to unnerve them. Dre barked, "What are you waiting for?" One of the crew members lunged toward Malik, who sidestepped effortlessly, his movements fluid and controlled. With a swift motion, he deflected the attacker's arm, sending him stumbling backward. Layla stepped forward to assist, her stance strong and poised, her every move precise. The dojo training came alive in those moments. The students worked as a team, their years of discipline and practice shining through as they defended themselves without resorting to unnecessary aggression. Amara and Nakamura coordinated seamlessly, guiding the students and stepping in when needed. The chaos of the confrontation was punctuated by the clatter of the barrel being knocked over. Amara's heart leapt as she saw Rico standing over it, breathing heavily. "It's empty," he called out, his voice laced with relief. "They were bluffing." Dre's face twisted in frustration. "You think this changes anything?" he snarled, stepping toward Rico. "You're still nothing." Before Dre could get any closer, Amara moved between them, her stance unyielding. "You're wrong, Dre. They're everything you'll never be. Strong, united, and fearless." Dre swung at her, but she anticipated the move, deflecting his attack with practiced precision. He stumbled, his bravado faltering as Amara stood firm. The crew, seeing their leader at a disadvantage, began to back away, their confidence crumbling. Nakamura stepped forward, his voice cutting through the commotion like a blade. "This ends now. Leave, and don't come back. The community has had enough of you." The weight of his words, combined with the student's unshakable presence, seemed to break something in Dre. He glared at Amara, his crew, and the students before spitting on the ground and retreating into the shadows. His crew followed him, their steps hurried, their earlier bravado completely gone. As the last of the gang disappeared into the night, the group let out a collective breath. The tension eased, replaced by a quiet, triumphant energy. Malik turned to Amara, a small smile breaking through his usually serious demeanor. "We did it." Amara nodded, her pride evident. "We did. Together." The students exchanged smiles and quiet words of celebration, their bond stronger than ever. Sensei Nakamura placed a hand on Amara's shoulder, his expression calm but filled with respect. "You've given them more than just skills, Amara. You've given them belief in themselves." Amara looked at the students, her heart swelling with pride and relief. They did that for each other. I just helped them see it. The following morning, the community was abuzz with the news of Dre's retreat. The factory confrontation had spread quickly, becoming a story of hope and resilience in the face of fear. Parents and neighbors stopped by the school and dojo to express their gratitude, their voices filled with newfound confidence. The students, though tired, carried themselves with quiet pride. They had faced their fears and emerged stronger, their unity a testament to everything they had worked for. Amara watched them as they entered the dojo that afternoon, their steps sure, their smiles bright. Sensei Nakamura approached her, his voice low. "The storm has passed, but the work continues." Amara nodded, her resolve unwavering. "It always does, but now they know what they're capable of." As the students began their drills, Amara stood at the edge of the dojo, watching with a sense of fulfillment. They had proven that strength wasn't just about fists or force. It was about standing together, no matter what. And in doing so, they had reclaimed more than their neighborhood. They had reclaimed their hope. She smiled, her heart light as she called out, "All right, team, let's get to work. This is just the beginning." In the end, this wasn't just a story about a teacher or her students. It was a story about resilience, unity, and the power of standing together against intimidation. Ms. Thompson wasn't just an educator. She was a beacon of hope in a community that had been overshadowed by fear for far too long. Her unwavering belief in her students' potential ignited a fire within them, transforming their karate training into something far greater than competition. It became a force for change. The students proved that strength isn't about fists or violence. It's about discipline, courage, and having the resolve to stand for what's right. They reminded their community that change begins with individuals who refuse to let fear dictate their actions. Together, they sent a clear message to Dre and his crew. The days of terrorizing their neighborhood were over. But the journey doesn't end here. This story is a call to action for all of us. It's a reminder that in the face of adversity, we have the power to make a difference, not through retaliation, but through unity, integrity, and perseverance. It's about empowering others to rise, just as Ms. Thompson empowered her students to believe in themselves. So, what about you? What can you do to stand up against injustice, to support your community, and to inspire the people around you? Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Let's spread the message that courage, kindness, and unity can overcome even the darkest challenges. Together, we can make a difference. One step, one action, one story at a time. The fight for change starts now. Will you be part of it?